I'm very delighted to be here today, and I have actually been here physically while the buildings of Copenhagen is completely empty. But I'm very thrilled to have the next hour with you guys talking about how to bring story to life. In my perspective as a futurist, it has never been more important. And I will get into how culture is changing, how we are changing our workplaces, and how we are getting much smarter with regards to rehumanizing people using new technologies. So before that, I'll just give you the main principles of how to be a futurist. It's not actually looking into the crystal ball like this. That would be nice, that would be easy. But it's actually a matter of co-creation. It's a matter of understanding transformation. And I'm sure you guys working at Egmont and Nordisk Film, you have already, you are futurist in some sense. You have to do that when you buy the next movies. And well, I hope to supplement the discussions, but I am a fun believer that the future should be co-created. Let me find a better background. A part of the future is, of course, as well to move into these new platforms. And I'm actually experimenting with the platform right now, and it can give me all kinds of tools, and I can go small, I can go tiny. So I hope this will be a nice place for me to be while I do the presentations. Well, how do you look as a futurist? It's very much looking at the trends you can see. It's very hard to spot wildcards, but it's then understanding the level of transformation. So it's like if you put a rock into a lake, you have to understand how many circles is it going to create and how is it going to impact different areas. So it's really, and I actually really believe this, that being a futurist should be a part of any DNA of a business these days, really understanding the changes and understanding what new competences will it take for me. And I know very well that you are sitting in all kinds of positions and chairs right now. And that's a big challenge, is to bridge it to your own reality and actually bridge it to the now. So already back in '96, when I worked at the European Commission, we made scenarios for European integration. And in one of the scenarios, we had Brexit. And already back then, we could see, the UK is very hesitant towards a European community. They had their colonies, their global outlook. Why should they be a part of this exclusive little circle? Why should they be together with the Germans, the losers of the Second World War? So we very rapidly could see that unless, they're in it for the money, and we really have to build in a culture and some European identity into this, otherwise we'll lose them. So the scenarios is not about leaning back saying, I told you so, when the future is finally happening. It's very much to give you an early warning sign as to how to accommodate. And what I'm going to do is I'm giving you some trends, and then of course you have to try and link it to your reality. And as Vibeke said, you are very welcome to pose any question that you like. Being a futurist is exactly about posing the interesting questions, looking into the uncertainties, and finding out how to deal with it in the present. So in January 27th, I had a whole group of different businesses together, and that morning we actually had the Chinese flag that had been abused as a coronavirus. And the other one was factories closing down in Wuhan. And I asked, so guys, what do you think will have the biggest level of transformation? The Chinese flag or Wuhan? And you're welcome right now to write in the chat, what do you think that people thought would have the biggest transformative power? The closing down in Wuhan, already there, we said, well, if that is happening, it could be the beginning of a global recession, closing down of borders. And then, of course, the Chinese flag, everybody said, oh, it's the Muhammad drawings. We have already tried that. We saw what happened in France. And now the Chinese have seen us, we are in trouble. So I'm already giving you the answer here. 100% said, well, the Chinese flag, that would be having the big transformative powers. And that's a challenge. Very often you see these things that are going to be very transformative for our society, but you have a tendency to look at your past experiences and saying, oh, but I know the Muhammad drawings and I know exactly what happened to our country back then. So my brain is able to forecast that. It's much harder when we see other kinds of changes. So let me try and run through some of the changes that are coming about within culture due to the COVID-19. And guys, I miss you so much. I really miss having an audience. So please, before I start, just give yourself a hug. I need a hug. You feel really alone standing in a room day in and day out from this. So yeah. So first of all, the first and most important thing is when you work as a futurist, it's so important that you don't say, this is great, or this is bad, or this will be a bright future, or this will be a black future. We have a tendency immediately to decide, you know, is it dangerous or is it good? Being a futurist is being a professional, curious person. And you can only be curious if you don't have an idea of whether things are good or bad. So the only principle I want you to take with you as being a futurist here together with me that for the next hour is to say interesting, exciting. So when you see Trump going bananas and now Capitol Hill, you say interesting, exciting. As a futurist, you have to say interesting, exciting, and then saying what sort of tendencies do we see within this rather than whether it's good or bad, because as soon as we do that, we get these blankers on. So while you do that, you have to open up. So before we move on, say interesting, exciting after me. Yes, I can hear that. And put your arms into it, interesting, exciting. So especially if something is really annoying, that you really think, what is going on here? You know, you go into the futurist mode saying, interesting, exciting, let me explore this a little closer. So for instance, deepfake is one way of manipulating stories these days. You can deepfake faces and basically you can get people to say anything. And instead of saying, oh, this is terrible and what is going to happen to democracy, you say, interesting, exciting, where can I download the app? Okay, it's this Chinese app. And I immediately downloaded the app on my phone and experimented. I went to bed with the future, which I call it, and I downloaded and I tried to film myself from different angles, getting other people to say things from my mouth. And then I realized, well, in the afternoon, when my hair is nice and my makeup is good, when I then have meetings with Australia in the morning, well, I should do video films of myself in the afternoon looking good. And then when I have the morning meetings at 7:30 with Australia, I should put on the fake video. Interesting, exciting, you know, then I look fantastic on all my Zoom and Teams meeting. And that's the opportunities that you really don't see if you are immediately closing down saying this is a terrible technology. Technologies are just tools, so we have to understand how can it rehumanize people, how will it change our approach to things.
Amen. Applying for jobs. Or I could come as this robot, Sophia, who already has a citizenship in Saudi Arabia.
Great. So being a futurist is very much about saying, and then what, and then what. So if I give you another example, we will have, in the next 5 years, we'll be able to lick our screens and we'll actually be able to taste. So instead of going to the restaurant, just ordering some takeaway food, you can have the taste on your taste buds. And that is coming from a university right now. And then you can say, okay, and then what? You have to say, and how can we use it? Is that going to be a new Tinder application so you can taste your date before you meet? Or will we use it in the cinema? Or will we use it in the gaming? How are we going to go about using that technology? So basically, like you can mix all colors, you can mix all tastes So we'll have a new dimension coming into society. But one thing is that the technology is there. It's more, how is it going to change the world as we know it? Culture-wise, a lot of things has happened here during COVID-19. You have a huge level of innovations in terms of how we meet. In terms of the environment, we talked about greenwashing. The new word now is clean washing, where the cleaners put notes on the chair and the table saying this has been cleaned. You can feel absolutely certain here. And I can tell you, it's not going to go back. Like we had terror attacks, we now have a terror prepared city. Likewise, we will have a pandemic prepared businesses and societies and urban environments. So those sort of things have come to stay, or you will be able to be ready in a completely different extent for the next situation. Another thing that has happened is this democratizing of society. The Getty Museum in Los Angeles, they have actually managed to democratize their museum. They made this competition at Instagram, where you should take some pictures in your own home and you should replicate the arts that they had hanging on the walls. And it was such a great success. It trended all over the world. And I tell you, once society opens up again, people will go to the Getty Museum because now it's their museum and not some elitist outing for the few in the local area. So they have really managed to bring stories to life worldwide, succeeding in that. And you know as well, you have some artists who have really managed to earn 20 times more than they used to by staging in the gaming universe. That has been replicated several times, but a fantastic way of bringing different stages together. Again, this is not something that is going away again. They are going to maintain exactly that. Then you have a much more engaging approach in culture. This is Smukfesten in Skanderborg in Jylland. They sold out these kits, which are basically just selling beer and chips and funny hats and drinks, and they call it the Smukfest. And they were sold out immediately, and that's because people feel extremely loyal to their events, and you can capitalize on that. And again, once we see culture moving back, we'll have this digital layer on top. I'm working a lot with the cultural houses of Denmark. So they might have an artist in one location, let's say in Birkerød, where there's one, and then they have a famous singer coming out there live, and then it will be transmitted in real time to all the other cultural centers. So you will actually go either to your local cinema or your local cultural center, and you'll be able to chat in real time with this artist. You'll be able to go backstage. You will be able to see a little documentary of how their life was, and then you will see them live. And at the same time, you can hang out with your neighbors. So that kind of combining different layers, going much deeper, immersing yourself much more in the experiences, that is really something that has accelerated everywhere. So you go to the museum in Copenhagen for an exhibition on modern woman in Gammel Strand, which is there right now, and suddenly also have a layer bringing you to all the exhibitions of modern women all over the world as an extra, bringing the story to life. So it has accelerated at the same time as culture has been suffering a lot. And another thing that has been really notable is how these artists have been able to brainstorm and chat across borders during the lockdown, something that they have never had the opportunity to do before. So I promise you we'll have this huge wave of creativity once we get back to the world. Oh, I have to get used to changing here. And then we have another interesting thing, that we're actually using all these smart layers of data to find out what is happening to people. And you actually have culture now on prescription, because you can actually measure that people who are depressed or feeling lonely, they will feel much better going to the cinema or going to see the theater, and they can actually measure betterment of people. And I think that's interesting. We have known that around sports for a long time, but that you can actually also work on people at that level, whether it's gaming or other cultural activities. We are gaining a lot of insights as to how is that actually impacting on people. So before I move on to these lasting trends of the pandemic, I would love to hear you. So have you experimented with the future during COVID-19, and how? And it's not by accident I have this guy sitting in front of a tent, because I can tell you all the outdoor activities, they have skyrocketed. So everybody who's selling tents and outdoor equipment, they have almost doubled their sales. And if you can see this binocular, looking at birds, looking at the tiny details in nature, that is trending too. So if you go by the lakes or anywhere, you will have these fantastic cameras where people are zooming in on small details. And I think somehow it's spending so much time for walk and talk and in nature. It's going to be very interesting to see whether it lasts. You can see there's been sold a lot of Corona dogs. So at least they live for another 13 years. So we will need to go with those for a walk. Have we had any surprises here, Vibeke, that you want to talk about, or should we move on?
Well, I can't see from the audience, but I mean, we could not get a dog, but we got a mouse for sure. And I've been walking many walks with my family and playing a lot of cards. And I've also been experimenting with a lot of drinks. Quite interesting. So, but let's move on, and then we'll see if something pops up.
So alcohol consumption has gone up. Other things that are interesting, the treatment guarantees at hospitals, that was put out of place. But people, because they started working with their back age and their knee problems, actually the waiting list have halved during the pandemic. So people have cured themselves moving around a bit. So I think that's interesting. Newborn babies have been putting on weight like never before, because these young mothers, they had a whole week for themselves together with the babies without the whole family coming in, needing coffee and tea and flowers put into vases. So it has really improved the breastfeeding. So that are some of the taboos that you would never have experimented with had we not had the pandemic. So looking into taboos are actually also very interesting when working with the future. But we have so many trends, so I'll move on to those. So the first trend is that we are being set free to create our own stories. We are really moving from time slaves to time owners. And that is not everybody, but people who can, to some extent, decide where to work from. And that is a huge difference. It's not just a question of being at home or being in the office, but we expect that 40% of the time we can actually work from home, or many people can work from home. And then people who will not be able to work from home, like your normal school teacher or nursery teacher or frontline hospital people, they will to a greater extent feel themselves as being time slaves, because everybody else can decide when to do what, and poverty is always relative. So for instance, people who felt lonely before the pandemic, they have made a survey in 26 countries, they actually feel less lonely now. So that is quite interesting, because they say, well, everybody else is sitting at home, so it doesn't feel so bad being on my own. And some other people are breaking down. Another experience that has happened is that the guys in the Nordic countries, they have spent a lot of time with their children. And I know that the paternity leave is already great in countries like Sweden, but in Denmark, it has been very hard to get the guys to be at home with the children. But a lot of women are working in the public sector, so the guys are working more tech, and they have actually been able to stay at home with these school kids. And the question is whether they will demand to spend more time with their kids once society go back. The book you see there, Aftershocks and Opportunity in a Post-Pandemic Society, is actually a book that I wrote with 14 other futurists from around the globe. And I can tell you this is a trend that belongs to the Nordic countries. In a lot of countries around the world, women have lost their job and they are the one going back to the kids, especially because the nanny had to be sent home during the pandemic and they were stuck with everything. So again, the future looks very different according to what culture you're coming from. And at this specific session, I'm going to talk from the Nordic perspective. So the big change here is really moving from going on your automatic pilot in sitting at your workstation saying, okay, so what should I be doing today? To actually being much more conscious about what sort of work activity do I need to do? What sort of value do I need to do? So that's why I mean that it's bringing personal stories to life, really moving from a work-life balance to a life-work balance, finding out what sort of personality do I have? Do I work well in the morning or in the afternoon? Am I social? Would I like some alone time? How is my life situation? What about my family? Is there anybody there who is particularly vulnerable? Do I have room to go for myself, or do I need a third pop-up place? A lot of people have been using their cars in this period of time actually as the only place they could be outside. And again, if you're sitting as a manager, this will create huge stresses and strains on how it used to be, because you need to accommodate this bottom-up storytelling of how people want and feel, and at the same time you need to create something which is better for the whole. So to give you an example, if you look at young people, they all say, oh, I want my own room, my own kitchen and my own toilet. And when we look at what gives them the good grades in school and what makes them stick to university, is that if they live together and if they have a caring community where they help each other, then they get better grade and they stay at university and the satisfaction rate is greater as well. So you can't just ask people what they want. As a manager of the future, you also have to find out the collective good. How do we onboard people? How do we have a culture where there's room for taboos? And here it's really, really important to find that balance. I think Denmark and Norway and Sweden and Finland is the most happy country in the world, are extremely well positioned to do exactly that. Because what makes a country the happiest country in the world? It's trust. So in the Nordic countries, we have more than 76% of us, we trust strangers. We trust strangers to do the best that they can. So we are willing to set them free because we think, okay, go and do whatever. You can give up your watch and move to a compass instead, finding out how to add value. I trust that you will do your best. In France, for instance, it's less than 22% who trust other people. You can see it in another prediction, which I did already a year ago, that the anti-vax people, they are more than 50% now in France because they don't trust people. In Denmark, we are far more pro-vax. We are trusting that, of course, it's going to bring us something good. So there are huge cultural differences. But in terms of writing our own stories at the labor market, we are positioned very well because we have the trust. And the second thing that you need for a happy country is freedom. It's freedom to do whatever you like. You can have any family structure you like. You don't necessarily need to dress up in a suit every day to go to work. Do whatever you please, and there's a huge level of tolerance for that. If some people are organizing their life in one way and other people are doing it another, we accept that as long as they deliver on the result. So what is this meaning? And we've been very proud that people have not been so infected by COVID-19. And of course, we have 1 million people in Denmark alone, and almost 50% are living by themselves in the Nordic countries. So you have a lot of people who are having a very individualistic approach to society. And I think this mukbang trend is where people eat with a YouTuber between 7 and 8 o'clock in the evening is a great example of how we have adapted to a very individualistic lifestyle, where we try to get cheered up by these external input. She never says anything, this YouTuber. She only prepares the food and then she will eat it with you. You can try to log on tonight at 7 o'clock and have a dinner with her. I'm not saying there are not tiny sexual tones in this as well, but it's very popular.
Please, Jeff.
And of course, as a futurist, I can't help thinking that laziness is a very important driving force as how our society is going. We love to say, and then I should do this, and then I should go for picnic, and then we can just see in everyday life that whenever things get easier, we're a little bit like water, we go there. So you remember when you had to pay by putting your credit card into a machine, pushing down a code? Terrible, you know, if you can just smile to the camera. And one of the things that has really accelerated, I'm working with the Versa agency in Australia. They're doing these chatbots. They expect these chatbots to fill up basically 90% of all our search by 2023. So to begin with, you know, we stopped talking to each other and we started texting each other instead, because it's just, if I call V, because she might answer back and it will take a long time. So it's much easier that we just text each other. And so we stopped talking. And I actually had a homeless on stage just before lockdown, Simon. He'd been living on the street for 8 years, and I was talking to him about sleeping on a bench in Copenhagen, and we have the most cameras everywhere. And why did nobody, you know, come and get you when you were only 17 and lying on this bench? And he said yes, and that was terrible. And he communicated in this tent with, I think we were 500 people there. It was at Bornholms Folkemøde. And then at one point I'm saying, but Simon, you're so good at communicating. And he said, yes. Well, I sit on a bench every day and communicate with people for 8 hours. So of course I'm good at communicating. But during the same time, I have just experienced that nobody's talking to each other any longer. You know, they are in their ear, they have their earbuds on, they hear their podcasts, and they don't talk. And the next step here are these chatbots that will actually be able to be your favorite communication partner. They will entertain you. They'll be able to listen to you. They will adapt to you.
Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie.
Calendar.
No meetings today. Remember, dentist at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open.
And we're gonna do one more.
Oh yeah. Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open. Open door.
Repeat that.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey, open door.
Play on the floor.
Get on the floor. Open the door.
Wrong
Open the
voice
door.
command.
So what does this mean? That it means that we'll maybe work from home for 40% of the time. We will have might well find completely new way of housing, of living. We will have in some countries they're deciding that the work from home day is on Friday. You have seen the booming in the sale of summer houses. We might take these 3 days off to experience, to go on these short workations. But we're also getting this local patriotism. Where do I actually live? Do I want to commute to work, or can I find 3 colleagues of mine nearby where I live? Can I invite them home for lunch in my house or in my flat? So these borders are being broken down. So if I want to summarize this, we are really moving from, remember the old days where we could only sleep at hotels, and then we compared them, you know, do they have room service and a 24-hour portier? And then you had Airbnb coming, and suddenly realized, you know, I can sleep in a tree, I can sleep on a boat, I can have a trampoline, and the whole notion of sleeping over just completely changed. Our mind just blew up with all the opportunities. We are going to see the same thing with our work life. It's bringing many stories to life. It's not going to be one size fit all. It's going to be many sizes fit many people. And that's going to challenge us in the first run, because it's really hard to be your own boss. But once we start dealing with this, we will see completely new outputs. The other one is this is stupid or smart. Of course, we have accelerated completely these smart data around us during the COVID-19. We are getting these digital twins. You have the ability to actually hear on my voice whether I'm about to develop a depression, whether I'm about to cough, whether I'm stressed, whether I don't understand what you are saying. And I spoke to Watson, a guy from there, John Smith, and he told me, in the future, when you go to the cinema with your son, my son is 17, and he can look at the worst horror movies, whether it's Stranger Things or whatever. I sit like this, I can't hear, I can't see, I'm so scared, I don't get anything out of it. And he said, well, in this future, we'll be able to calibrate the stories so it will be tailored completely to your emotional needs. And then we can gear it up so he can have a caliber 25 and look at all the blood. So for the first time in history, you can actually leave the stories and you had the same experience, but a very different caliber of the same story. So really this one says that you can have a nice cinema tour for all age groups. Well, that will make much more sense when it's tailored to me. So you haven't seen anything yet when it comes to individualization, and that is just tuning up very rapidly. Likewise, if you look at the gaming, that has also been accelerated like crazy, and we have moved from gaming being a periphery. Are you a gamer or you're not a gamer, to what games do you play? Everybody is a gamer these days, and it's and here is really an area where you have the best artists coming in now, you have the best instructors, and you can really bring stories to life. That said, of course, they should be careful that they're not ending in the same category as Netflix, where their boss said, you know, our biggest competitor is your night's sleep. And you have actually looked at production rate going down because people are binging movies till late at night, and they go to work like with a hangover the next day because they can't turn it off. In China, they have actually decided that the gamers should only have 90 minutes a day, and they turn off the internet at 10 o'clock at night. And I think that's a good example of interesting, exciting, how the Chinese government is taking responsibility on behalf of its citizens when they say, well, it gives them something good, but it can also take overhands. So we go into this new century where it's about rehumanizing people. Again, just like the work life, it's also in terms of our consumptions of entertainment and education. How do we create a nice balance that gets something better out of people rather than pushing them, getting the most out of people like they were a lemon? So it's a big transformation going on here. What I really
so let's
think
now
is
have
cool,
a look at what that might be like.
As a futurist, it's really how all these pattern recognitions that are coming now and AI will be able to fast forward me. So if I live as I live now, as I commute, and if I communicate as I do now, how will my life be in 5 years to now? So actually that you are actually able to envision these different futures, that is a very powerful way to get people to act, because they can actually try living that future and then going back saying, what do we want? So if you ask me about the next American presidential election, we might well see these simulations of how the world might be, and then we decide from that. This is just a great way of showing how the weather is changing. So you actually understand it with your head and your heart and your stomach.
Example. We know Florence is going to bring 1 to 3 feet of inundation across many locations. That certainly is enough to knock you off your feet. It can definitely stall cars out and even carry cars away.
So we can scroll in time, we can adapt, and then we're looking into this emotional data. So for a long time you had, a plane like a Boeing flying across the sky. You would know exactly that it needed to change spare parts. And it's incredible that we haven't done that with people before, understanding what makes them thrive. And finally, I have to point to one technology which I find is really interesting. It's this GP3, which is this automated script writing algorithm. So you can get a computer to write an article. You still have to put the bits and pieces together, but the Guardian asked the computer actually to write an article about why we shouldn't be worried about artificial intelligence. And then they put together the pieces. And that is, of course, exploding as well. So what we should see now is not computers replacing people, but it's augmenting people. It's lifting us up. We're having almost an extra brain. We could have it embedded in us with Elon Musk and his Neuralink, but that is happening. And here we are going very slow in the Nordic countries compared to the rest of the world, because as you know, China is going to move very fast, and they have done that during COVID, tracking people, and they don't have any hesitance in using whatever machine learning device that they need in order to fix the environment, in order to fix people. In America, it's a commercial way that we in the Nordic countries are going to adapt to. We are going to have Amazon and talking to Amazon, I want to do this, I want to do that. So it is entering the Nordic region as well, and we are willing to deal with private data in order to get information. And then, of course, we have our own GDPR. So the last trend I want to talk about is that, and that's always interesting if we are taking this broad theme covering a lot of areas of bringing stories to life. Who is going to be the villains and who are going to be the heroes? For a long time, age was just a number. So we had this blurring of age, you could very much as a pensioner live like a young person. So you decide yourself what sort of life phase you're in. And we as futurists have talked a lot about that. That is really changing. We are seeing a gap here. We're seeing a gap in how people are dealing, and especially in terms of age. This is from Wuhan, and it's just to say we can really look forward to these huge parties coming on as soon as we start vaccinating society. And so there's no doubt, we will go back. We have all these, we have a lot of people who can't wait to party, who can't wait to go out again. So, I really expect partying to take off completely crazy, because we have been to a war, and like when you held your hand of your first boyfriend, it was a very big thing. Well, the first really kissing with the tongue and hugging, it's going to be really, really big for us. It's always like that. If you have a scarce resource, it is becoming the luxury. So we will, when we meet, really take care. And all surveys shows that if you hug somebody, if you hear their voice, if you see their body language, something fantastic happens. In terms of heroes and villains, you have Blackman. He was our main refugees in X Factor before the pandemic. He's so yesterday now. He was like, you are in and you are out judging individuals. Now we are together apart, and that is changing culture for always. On top of that, we have a lot of politicized, active citizens, youth from around the world. We have the Me Too, we have the I Can't Breathe. And what is really interesting here is that numerically, a lot of these young people, they don't get anything out of our democratic system because you have more elderly people, but they are mobilizing very rapidly using the social media. And as you know, we have several people in the Nordic countries that have lost their jobs. We had and it's really a generation gap. So you have some people who just cannot understand what is going on. It's not that they don't want. We have a photographer, Jan Graup, who has been taking all these war photos, and he just doesn't know what is going on. Why he understands what Sofie Linde is talking about, not having sexual harassment, but he's now scared of employing women or having women interns because he doesn't understand this Me Too. So you really have a generation gap here, and issues that can be simplified, those will be trending, and they are creating a different kind of vulnerability. So if you look at Seoul right now, we have this big case of how can we pick a white guy, he might be the best in the whole world, to do the voiceover for a black guy. And that then all the good ratings, you know, they fall apart because we have a generation who are not willing to compromise around this. And again, I sat with youth from 50 different nations, and they said, Lisa, in the future, you know, we only want to work for businesses who have this purpose, who are living up to the United Nations sustainability goals. Those are the only one we want to work for. We only want to share data with them. And we only want to buy those guys' products. So please make us a LinkedIn where they are the only one who can enter, because we don't even want to see the others. They don't exist anymore. And it's really very interesting to see how this is going to play out. So you have a hero now, which is Jonas. He's created this youth movie called Grænser. He's made several ones. So he listened a lot to his young audience of 17-year-old high school students, and they write in, what should the next episode be about? And you have this whole karma around it, that established businesses, established stories, you know, they don't listen to you, they are the enemy. So you have a different kind of hero emerging, whereas the old heroes like Jan Graup, he's just, you know, sorry guy, you lost it, you're no longer a role model, we fired you. And it's happening overnight. And again, remember to say interesting, exciting. As a futurist, I'm not bringing this up to say whether it's good or bad. It's just very interesting to follow how this is unfolding. If we look at the Capitol Hill situation again, 80% of the people who occupied Capitol Hill, they actually spent their time creating stories themselves that they posted on TikTok, that they posted on Instagram, that they posted on YouTube. So it was one live movie story. So this guy who's waving to the camera, it's not the best way to become a criminal, right? But it's, again, a very interesting way of seeing how you have these movements taking over, creating their own stories, creating their own reality, and broadcasting this. And then in the old days, we had Bruce Willis or Arnold Schwarzenegger. We will have a hero, you know, who will come and save the day and fix everything. So we'll sit there in our sofas and wait for the happy ending, for some guys to fix it all. Now we have our Prime Minister, Mette, who might not fix it all. But where the trend is going is really, it's a leaderless society. It's more almost like Al-Qaeda. I can use that without saying we should be like Al-Qaeda, but having these cells communicating with each other, developing sign language. And something which I find is fascinating is that a lot of young people are now being prosecuted in Hong Kong. Well, they have then decided, okay, then we fight against the Thai king. because we will not be prosecuted for that. That's completely legal in Hong Kong. And the people in Thailand, they are then fighting for democratizing Hong Kong. So they have actually swapped enemies, which I think is a fantastic ability that many people can communicate, they can make strategy, and they can change. And there is not one single leader you can call, because the strength is actually this dispersion of power. And I think it reminds me a little bit of what I was talking about, how we are moving from work-life balance to life-work balance. There is some trend going on here. I can see in everything where it's very much that we are bringing ourselves and our lives out. What will happen now is a long-term rebuild, and in New Zealand they are working on the well-being budget, where they actually use all these data points to measure the well-being. What is your network? How well are you at socializing? How well are you at using culture? And then they can make the prediction of how you will actually do in society. And this is really interesting for you guys at Nordisk Film and Egmont, because they have suddenly found out that it's a psychological well-being, which is the most important investment for people, because you want them to be active, you want them to be able to find a job. So right now we see a situation where some people are binging, other people are extremely active, creating things, creating story, creating their own life and value. And well, in New Zealand, they say that's why the most important investment should be in the culture, in the psychological well-being, in engaging people, because then they find a job, then they become happy, then they find a nice husband, then they get healthy kids. So for instance, in Denmark, we have now found out that you earn 12 crowns per kilometer you go bicycling, because then you don't get ill, your mental well-being gets better, you get more social because you look out instead of sitting in a car. So that kind of calculation is really transforming and will form the rebuilding process. And here it's really going to be an important part, whether you are part of the villains or the heroes. Time is flying. So in order to sum up, we are looking at all these bringing story to life, really for not dehumanizing people with technologies taking over, but really igniting us, rehumanizing us, and really understand. So we're going to look back and we're going to think, oh my God, we treated people so primitive back then, you know. We pushed them and we let them sit there at the conference theaters for hours. We let them travel across the world for 1 hour meetings. You know, we don't need to do that anymore. We can start finding out what sort of platforms, what sort of stories will bring them to life. We'll see a whole new level of local patriotism, because we are moving into an era of intention. So when I say intention rather than purpose, it's micro intention. So what is my intention for the next hour? Okay, so should I be sitting at my office, or should I be going somewhere else or talking to this person? So really understanding what sort of stories, what sort of frameworks you want to stage. It's passion, and rather than me, it's going to be different bubbles of we. It's going to be new ways of collaborating, and we will have a lot of partying going on, and we will have a complete counter to this lockdown that we have had. That said, I just went to the Department of Dermatology at the hospital the other day to do some research, and you know, sexually transmitted diseases has actually grown during the pandemic. So people have been dating and they have been meeting. Yeah. So new stories, bringing stories to life. So as I see it, you are in a fantastic. So that was a very big tour, because you are based in so many positions and places. So I hope that from this buffet, the buffet is finished, by the way. There won't be buffets in the future, but this little futurist buffet, I hope you could take out some bits and pieces that you will apply to your everyday quest for new competences and curiosity. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Liselotte. And I think there's time for like a few questions, and at least I have one to begin with. You talk about this local dimension. So I'm curious to know whether you think that our appetite for local stories will be greater.
It will. Local patriotism is simply that from having these villages that we drove home to when we were tired and then sat and binge something, suddenly we use more daylight time there. We engage with the locals and we find out, hey, what can I do locally? And then we are actually also willing to pay a premium price to support this local. That said, we are going to go on the Amazon because laziness is a major driving force.
I know that.
In one sense, we organize globally, but we execute locally.
That I get.
Yeah.
But we have seen like a big appetite for like local movies the last half year. Do you think that there will be a more like, how can you say, look for local culture, local stories, or will we put the big view out again?
I mean, we have fallen in love with ourselves. We love stories about ourselves. And I talked about the transformation with the Chinese flag. We love stories where we play the main role. So this local patriotism is coming back, especially because we are allowed to organize much more holistically where we live. So we will start engaging with who are our neighbors, what is our local community, what is my favorite cafe, what restaurants am I supporting, what cultural scenes am I supporting. Also, we have this almost biodiversity coming back into society. We had this huge globalization trend where everything looked the same. So I could go to New York and I basically saw the same in Stockholm. And suddenly we had this time apart, and that is going to reignite a lot of creativity, while at the same time we plug in for good experiences from otherwhere. We will start traveling again, but we will also stay in love with our local community.
And it also seems like we're going to be very social again. That said, you think that we will still enjoy watching movies together in the cinema and having this social dimension?
Yes, how I would put it is that I was just asked, do we have zoos in the future? And no, we don't have zoos where the animals are like this and they're treated bad and the food is shit. But yes, we will have zoos if the story is fantastic and people are blown back and thinking, this is just great to spend a day out like that. And that's exactly the same with the cinema. So it's a question you can only answer if you look for the quality and experience and if you move with changing times. So of course you cannot have the cinema of the past where you get a bad back and you are sitting in a stuffy room. But if you manage to look especially at the scarce resources of going offline, of really having discussions and debates and really having an outing, people will love it and they will even pay double price of what they do today.
We have a question here, Liselotte. Do you think we will spend more or less money in 2021-22, save money for crisis or live for the moment?
We'll live for the moment. We have a lot of money burning in our pockets. We have already bought the summer house. We have bought the new furniture at home, and we really want to spend money on experience and on experiences, and we want to build up our social life again. And I've just been on this dating program on Sunday, and I tell you, there's a lot of singles out there, and they're saying it's payback time now. I really need to go out and experience life again. So there's a huge hunger, and there's no doubt that that we are also willing to do it because we've been in this war together, and we want to build up culture again. And I think what has really been quite interesting is that we have found out how we cannot live without culture. We've already taken culture for granted, something in the periphery. Suddenly it has become the center heart piece of who we are. And I think personally that's really important because we need arts to inspire us as to how should the future be. We really need some creative people who can draw up imagination and who can challenge us with all the dilemmas. And it's probably one of the only areas where you can really create this sense of community, which you cannot when people are sitting in the echo chambers at home. it's really, really scary if we imagine that we were locked down for another 10 years. I don't dare thinking about how many fake news and movements would come out of that.
We have another question here. Interesting and exciting. Looks like Corona came just in time. World wouldn't work from home 10 years ago. Do you think we'll see more new diseases that will send us home? Well, that's a hard one to predict.
That's the one where I'm saying, well, I'm not an epidemiologist, ask Søren Bostrøm, but the health people I'm talking to is saying, well, we will have several of these and they will come at a certain interval, but we will also be better at creating vaccines. Something which you should keep an eye on here. I don't know if you're an investor. A personal investment has gone crazy as well, as you know. Something that is going on right now is CRISPR, and it's these gene manipulated vaccines, and they can actually treat cancer and they can be used for treating diabetes. So it's not just a vaccine, it's really a paradigm shift. So we can expect people to get a lot older. They won't die from cancer, they won't die from diabetes. Denmark will go bankrupt because Nordisk is getting into big trouble because they have to sell their insulin. But at the people perspective, it's, I guess, very interesting, exciting that we are having these solutions coming now. And we also have a whole community of scientists who have really accelerated this. So the pharma industry, from being the bad guys, have become one of the heroes at the moment.
And one last question here. You're talking about us shaping our own story and work life. Do you think people will become more narrow-minded, or, you know, will we be more open-minded here?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, and that's where scenario comes into play. What we see, and that was why I called it time owners and time slaves. What sort of energy is it going to give me that I can spend more time at home with my loved ones? I can organize my own life. Will that give me more energy to engage in the local community and see my local culture and being more outgoing? Or will I be so stressed about being my own boss that I can't press the stop button and move away from the screen and I will break down? But again, we will have these simulators around us and they're going to say, Lisa, no more coffee, go and have a nap, you know, call a friend because you will break down if you carry on like this. So I'm sure that there will be a lot of nudging helping us as well to make wiser decisions as we do today when we are stupid rather than smart.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you a lot, Liselotte. I see a lot of both opportunity, hope, and exciting times ahead of us. Thank you all for being together with us today. Now it's just to say take care, be safe, and have a really nice weekend. See you.
A lot of parties coming.
We look forward. Bye-bye.